Hi, my name is Jess Jones. I teach in the School of Art and Design. Currently, I am teaching a class called Intro to Textiles, and this summer I converted this class to online asynchronous. This fall, it remained online asynchronous because I believe the summer class was really successful, and I really enjoyed teaching it online. This class covers material identification, so types of fibers and structures. It covers color theory as it applies to dyeing, the dyeing process. It covers chemical dyeing on natural fibers, pattern dyeing and resist dyeing, and it covers basic sewing of fabric with a machine, or with the new online version of this class, I included a hand sewing option. So this is unique to put online because students are examining, manipulating, and documenting physical material. And this is difficult in terms of instruction and evaluation as well. And there's a lot of limitations, but this opened up a lot of really interesting opportunities for me and for other textiles courses, which was really interesting. So students essentially, to get through this class, have to create a wet and dry textile studio in their living spaces. And this uses like kitchen sinks and tables for cutting and sewing, and that can take up a lot of space. So it's a lot of materials. It's a material heavy class. It's a lot of space and commitment. And that has been a big demand on the class, and something that I've definitely tried to respond to in terms of different, what students have access to is vastly different. So I have some strategies for the way that I manage the load of materials and the load of safety information in this class. There's a lot of materials for students to source, to learn about, and they do have to abide by safety precautions in a space where I'm not monitoring them. So that becomes an interesting challenge, right? It definitely takes a lot of trust. There is also the issue of physical instruction, of a haptic experience, and how to organize an iCollege experience that helps a student build skills throughout the course in the same way that we would in the classroom. So we rely on combinations of extremely simple processes to build more complex skills in this class. And iCollege is remarkably suited to developing that sort of stair-step method of learning, which this class does really well on iCollege for that reason. We have to be able to share work and compare work in the class. And students also have to be able to share their work with me. And so it's definitely an image heavy class. So students are often sending images to discussion posts and to me. And that's been something that has been an interesting kind of challenge. So I'll look at some of those. And I'm only going to look at the things that worked really, really well in this class. I'm not going to bother with the things that are failing, but these are the things that I'm going to take forward that worked really well, and I'll keep it very positive. And I also cannot say enough good things about the Mastering Online Teaching class, which I took this summer to prepare for converting this class to an online class. It was extremely important for me as a teacher, and having to go back to learning what goes in a syllabus and things like learning objectives and goals and relevance, that became actually really important because I believe that an online course is an experience that needs to be designed for students, and we all need to kind of agree on what goes in a course and how students sort of get through a course, what the expectations are, and if there's a measure of predictability with what's going to be expected of them through different modules in the class. Like, I actually think that's a really, really important thing, where they encounter information and that they encounter it relatively consistently among courses. That is actually really important. So I thought that, even though I've been teaching for 15 years, I thought that was a really key feature of the MOT class, the Mastering Online Teaching. And I couldn't speak more highly about it. It was a great experience. So they really did influence me a lot. So I'll share my screen and show you the sort of results of this experiment. So all the materials that students are required to have are listed under the Welcome and Safety Info module. And this module has the syllabus, as well as the materials and everything that they need to know in terms of safety. I also find it important in this first module to set up how they are supposed to navigate iCollege. So at the top, you have this course is organized in the following ways. And it says, when you click on this, this is what's going to happen. You're going to work through each module in the same way. You're going to encounter this here and there. And I think that actually really helps them understand how to navigate this course. I've had a student recently in the past week come to me and ask me, she was having trouble with another studio class and how it was organized and where to find certain things. And this explicitly tells students everything you need is linked in order in every single module. And I think that's a really important thing to have. But looking at this materials list, materials can be pretty expensive. And I try to do my best to make students aware of the cost of these materials. This is a really extensive list. It's 2 pages long. I link it as a PDF because some of this stuff they could find locally, and they can print this list out and find some things locally. And still in the PDF, you can click on an item and it will take you to the vendor for that item, and you can build a cart right off the list, which I think is really helpful. So I try to be really clear on the expense of the class. The fees are not applicable to this class. So this is an online asynchronous class, and students are not paying fees, which is really helpful in terms of maintaining their finances and having control over their money, and they have the ability to be really resourceful and bring costs down as much as possible. But it does mean that the burden is on them to find certain things that are required. So that's sort of a balance. Because I take safety so seriously in the textiles classroom, I've actually done a lot of research on how to use our, the products that we use at home. And I've also found ways to link students to the information that I typically keep on hand in the classroom. So for instance, I link them to MSDS, which I guess is just called SDS, Material Safety Data Sheet. And that has information about the chemical makeup of what we're using. And typically it doesn't mean much to students because they have very short-term exposure with these dyes. If they had long-term exposure, this might be an issue, but often students do want this information if they have extreme sensitivity to chemicals, or if they are pregnant and they want to take this to their doctor and consult their doctor about whether the class is what they want. Typically, it hasn't been an issue though, but it's nice just to have on hand. And this links to the dye suppliers' safety data sheets for the dyes that we use, which is really helpful. Typically, though, students only need to make sure not to use utensils and containers that will come into contact with food, and they need to dispose of dyes properly. That's pretty much the only thing that they need to do. But I still make a lot of safety videos and demo videos on the equipment and the chemicals that we will be using. And I find that it's better to make the videos myself. Online, I see a lot of bad habits and a lot of disregard of what I would think were proper safety procedures in using these things. So I think I do link to YouTube videos to show bad examples of what students should not do and the differences of what I'm teaching them, which I do think is helpful. One of the things that I think is important in making these videos, and I mean, students don't know how to use an iron. They don't necessarily how to cut, they don't know how to cut fabric straight, you know, things like that. So anything that's hot, anything that's sharp, anything that's chemicals, I do demos on. And I use a single table in my own home, a 10-year-old laptop camera, and I don't bother with too much editing because I think it's actually really important for students to see that I'm working under a certain type of limitation. I find that helpful. I use in later on when I demonstrate sewing, I actually use a sewing machine from the 1930s. It's a very, very vintage machine. It is electric though. I have some that are non-electric that actually survived the last pandemic. But I do like demonstrating on a machine just to prove to them that, like, you know, you don't need anything that's up to date or necessarily new to sort of get through this class. So this is an example of how I structure each module in the Intro to Textiles class. When you click on the first module, this box at the top, I use this constantly. Every module has the exact same pieces of information. A brief statement about what we're going to do, and then the exact supplies that you need for the module, and then the workflow. So this class would normally be 6 hours a week, split into 2 sections, Tuesday and Thursday, and students would, I think it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. So I try to piece the tasks for each module based on what they would normally spend in a class period. So this is sort of what to do each week on a Tuesday and a Thursday if this class were not asynchronous, but this just helps students manage their time. And the first topic is the introduction. It looks very similar in every module. And this has a description of what we're doing, but it also has the learning outcomes from the syllabus. And it has the deliverables, like what is it that you're going to make? And every introduction also has either student samples, previous samples, or sample assignments. So this is some basic color theory, some notes and questions I'm asking about color. This is what I thought I wouldn't be able to do online, and it's worked beautifully. So students just photographing their swatches. This is from burn tests. When you burn, singe the end of fabric, it tells you a lot of interesting information. It tells you whether it's natural or synthetic. You can actually work with the material with your hands and tell me if it's stretchy, is it knit or woven, is it what type of weave is it? These are sorts of things that we talk about, and I wasn't sure whether this would come across, and it absolutely does. So this I was excited to see worked. In this first module, the way that it's structured after the introduction, there are topics that would serve as lectures. So, you know, things that sort of tell you about fibers and structures, things that tell you about color theory. There's also activities. So things like burn tests and color theory exercises are part of just this first module. There are also demo videos for each one of these, but I think it's nice to have the information like they would have in a handout, but I also have the handout ready to be printed if they want to print it and keep it next to them while they're working instead of using the computer screen. This is especially important when you're working with dyes. It's nice to have the video, but you don't necessarily want to be working around your computer. At the end of the module, there is also a quiz, and that tests them over the material. There's also an assignment preparation. This tells them how to photograph pieces, how to assemble it into a single PDF, how to upload it before the assignment. So the assignment instructions are, see the assignment preparation module, and this goes into detail about exactly what I'm looking for. It shows the example again, it shows how to take a picture in natural light, and I think that's really important. A similar thing can be found in a much more advanced module, which is module 5. Once we learn fiber and color, we put those together in dyeing. Once we learn dyeing and sewing, we put those together for a project in module 5. Again, the materials list, here's the workflow for the week. The introduction is a more advanced assignment. I like with the introductions to always have a banner image that's relevant to what we're working on and a quote that's in color, just like a textbook would. So they know where they are. At the beginning of each module, they know that it looks like this format. So I keep that same template for each module introduction. So this is one where there's objectives, deliverables. I show student examples. And I had a graduate student assemble previous works from students that were successful. They're tasked with dyeing and sewing a composition that mimics a famous painting. So they have some choice over what it is that they're doing. They get to choose a famous painting. And it's a really, I love this assignment. And the last assignment is a lot more free form that involves their own practice, but this actually employs the skills that we've learned from the class completely. So. Again, with submitting this type of work online, I wasn't sure whether it would be, whether I would be able to determine issues of craftsmanship, but it became really obvious with the basic things that people were submitting. If they photograph it nicely and they follow the instructions on how to photograph something, they have to include the inspiration image and the photograph, a front and back, and it's extremely obvious. I can tell a lot. Also, they may not know what to hide from me, so that may also be a factor. But it seems like this grading this has been actually pretty easy. This is a level where I can use a rubric, and it becomes pretty standard after a while. So I was surprised that this was easy enough to do. So those are sort of ways that I've been able to work with iCollege successfully that I've been really pleasantly surprised. I'm still working on some aspects of the class. I would really like to bring in more direct links to the college and career site with every module. That's something that I'm working on. Participation in the fall has been a little different because I think that in the summer, students have probably one class or one or two. And this fall, I have students that have 5 classes, and that's extremely difficult to maintain with online courses. Especially with mostly online courses. I think that's actually very, very hard. So I've been able to migrate a lot of this information into other textiles courses, which has been really helpful to our PTIs and our grads. And that's definitely saved them a lot of time and a lot of stress in reinventing the wheel on iCollege for their own studio classes. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.